She was listed as probable, a label that suggested uncertainty and raised questions about whether she was truly ready to perform. But then, the doubts disappeared. Night after night, she started dropping 25 points, and she kept doing it for an entire week. What looked like a cautious injury update suddenly became the beginning of a stunning run.
Caitlin Clark just went down and holding her right, or left ankle rather. So Ryan Howard picks up the foul. That'll be her first, but...
The pressure was rising, opponents were adjusting, and every game made the previous one look less like a fluke. Suddenly, the player everyone was watching became the player nobody wanted to face. The numbers were impossible to ignore, and the momentum was getting harder to stop. So how did a player listed as probable suddenly become this unstoppable? The word probable. If you've never played competitive sports at a high level, probable might sound almost reassuring. Probable means likely. Probable means she's probably going to play, right? Ask any athlete, and they'll tell you the truth. Probable is a word soaked in uncertainty. It's not a vote of confidence, it's a hedge. It's the training staff covering themselves in case the body doesn't hold up the way everyone's hoping it will. For her, it started the way these things usually do, quietly, and then all at once. A tweak in practice that nobody thought much of at the time. A little tightness that she brushed off because that's what competitors do. She kept playing through it, kept pushing, because sitting out never felt like an option to her. Not when there was a rotation spot on the line and a coaching staff that had, more than once, shown they were willing to give her minutes to someone else the second she looked even a little bit breakable. By the time the pain became impossible to ignore, it was already too late to hide it. The trainers saw the way she favored one side during warm-ups, the way she winced, just slightly, coming down from a jump she'd normally land without thinking twice. And just like that, the word appeared next to her name on the injury report for the world to see. Probable.
Clark goes down near midcourt. Chaos as K-State thought the game was over. Gregory injured as well.
You have to understand what that tag does to a player's reputation in real time. It doesn't just affect her playing time, it affects how people talk about her. Broadcasters hedge their predictions. Fantasy analysts warn their audience not to count on her. Fans in the comments start typing things like, "She's not 100%, don't expect much." Opposing coaches start building game plans around the assumption that she's compromised, that there's a weakness to attack. And the cruelest part? Nobody was wrong to wonder. The pain was real. The uncertainty was real. She genuinely didn't know, walking into that week, whether her body was going to cooperate with what her mind was demanding of it. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with being probable. You're not injured enough to get sympathy. You're not healthy enough to get confidence. You exist in this in-between space where everyone is watching you a little too closely, waiting to see which version of you shows up. She has talked, in quieter moments since, about how that week didn't start with excitement. It started with fear. Fear that she'd take the floor and let everyone down. Fear that the pain would flare up mid-game and there'd be nothing she could do about it, except limp to the bench in front of a national television audience. Fear, maybe the deepest one, that this would be the week people finally decided she wasn't as reliable as they'd hoped. But here's the thing about fear, when you pair it with a player who refuses to be defined by a label. Sometimes it doesn't shrink you. Sometimes it lights something. Think about what it actually costs an athlete to carry that tag into a locker room every single day. It's not just the physical pain, though that's real enough on its own. It's the mental tax of walking past reporters who ask, gently but pointedly, whether she thinks she'll be able to go tonight. It's overhearing assistant coaches debate her minutes in hushed tones by the whiteboard, like she isn't standing 20 feet away. It's scrolling past fan forums, if she's brave enough to look, and seeing her name attached to phrases like, load management candidate, or wouldn't rely on her tonight. None of that shows up in a box score. None of it gets measured, but it accumulates, day after day, the same way soreness accumulates in a joint that never quite gets the rest it needs. And for a competitor, a real one, the kind who has spent a lifetime clawing for a spot on a roster, that accumulation doesn't just hurt, it insults something deeper. The decision. There's a moment before every big performance that never makes it into the box score. It happens in a hallway, or a training room, or the quiet 15 minutes before a team bus pulls up to an arena. It's the moment an athlete looks at the risk in front of them and decides, privately, what they're going to do about it. She could have sat this one out. Nobody would have blamed her. Probable gives you an exit ramp if you want it. She could have told the training staff the pain was worse than it was, taken the maintenance day, and nobody outside the organization would have thought twice. But that's not who she is. And if you followed her career at all, you already know that about her. She's the type of competitor who treats a maybe
list in the NCAA for women's college basketball. Career high in points, 49, tied a career high from the three-point line.
like a personal insult. So she made a decision. Not a reckless one. She wasn't ignoring her body, and the training staff wasn't clearing her to play through anything dangerous. But she made the decision that mattered most. She was going to trust herself over the label. She was going to let her play speak louder than the injury report ever could. Ask any coach who has managed a competitor like this, and they'll tell you you don't talk a player like her out of playing. You manage the risk, you adjust the plan, and you get out of the way. Her coaching staff reportedly had a conversation with her before that first game, laying out a modified role, lighter minutes, less pressure. She listened, and then she went out and blew past every single one of those limitations within the first quarter. Because here's something people forget about. Players who get labeled probable, week after week, year after year, they've usually spent their entire careers being underestimated in one way or another. Maybe they weren't the top recruit. Maybe they were overlooked in the draft. Maybe there was always somebody bigger, faster, more hyped standing next to them, getting the attention instead. And athletes who grow up in that environment develop something the highlight reels can't measure, a chip on their shoulder that never really goes away. That chip doesn't disappear just because your name shows up on an injury report. If anything, it gets sharper. She didn't walk into that arena that first night trying to prove she was healthy. She walked in trying to prove she was still her, the version of herself that shows up when it matters, the version that doesn't get diminished by a word on a piece of paper. And in the tunnel, right before tip-off, teammates say she didn't look nervous. She looked focused in a way that made the people around her a little uneasy, honestly, because they'd seen that look before. It was the look of someone who had already made up her mind about what was about to happen, long before the ball was even in the air. There's a particular quiet that settles over an athlete in those final minutes before a big moment. And it's not the same as calm. Calm implies the absence of stakes. This was something closer to focus under pressure, the kind where every distraction gets filtered out until all that's left is the task directly in front of you. Teammates who walked past her in the hallway that night describe her as almost eerily still, headphones on, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, running through what she needed to do rather than what everyone was saying about whether she could do it. Night 1. You can feel it in an arena when something different is happening. The energy shifts before the scoreboard does. Early in that first game, she looked tentative understandably. There was a hesitation in her first few possessions, a slight hitch in her first drive to the basket.
Let's start you off late in the first quarter. Clark drives, spins, gets inside, gets the and one layup to go. Fever cut it to 6 after the made free throw, and then it was all CC after this from 33 feet.
Like her body was still negotiating with her mind about what it was willing to do. The crowd noticed it. The broadcast noticed it. For a few minutes, it looked like maybe the doubters were going to be right after all. And then something clicked. It wasn't one highlight reel moment that flipped the switch. It was a sequence. A stop on defense that turned into a fast break. A contested mid-range jumper that dropped clean through the net despite every reason it shouldn't have. A no-look pass that showed she wasn't just playing to survive, she was playing to control the game. Possession by possession, you could see her trusting her legs again, trusting her instincts, trusting the years of work that got her here in the first place. By the second half, probable wasn't a word anyone in that building was thinking about anymore. She started attacking the paint like a player with something to prove, because she was one. Every basket seemed to carry a little more force than it needed to. Every rebound was fought for like it was the last one of the game. She wasn't just playing within her role anymore, she was expanding it in real time, forcing her coaching staff to rewrite the plan on the fly because there was no reasonable way to take her off the floor. When the final buzzer sounded, she'd put together a performance that made the earlier hesitation feel like a distant memory, a night that, on paper, read like the kind of stat line reserved for a player at full strength, not one who'd been a question mark on the injury report just hours earlier. The reaction in the locker room afterward wasn't celebration so much as recognition. Teammates who had watched her fight through soreness in practice all week exchanged the kind of glances that said, "We knew, but we didn't know it would be like this." Her coach, usually careful with his praise, was reportedly blunt in his post-game comments, the kind of quote that gets clipped and replayed because it says the quiet part out loud. She was never supposed to be able to do what she just did. But one night doesn't make a story like this one. One night is a spark. What happened next is what turned it into a fire. It's worth slowing down for a second on what actually made that first game different, because it wasn't just the final numbers. Plenty of players have big scoring nights. What separated this one was the way it happened, not through a hot shooting streak where the ball just happened to fall, but through a visible, almost physical transformation in how she carried herself possession by possession. In the first quarter, her movements were careful, calculated, protective.
Yeah, Caitlin Clark's still searching for her first three, but she has 4 assists in this game. We've seen her connect with multiple post players. Alyssa Smith on the receiving end a couple of times we saw.
By the fourth, they were explosive, decisive, almost defiant. Anyone who has watched enough basketball can spot the difference between a player who's playing not to get hurt and a player who's playing to win. The first 10 minutes of that game, she was clearly the former. And then, somewhere around the midpoint of the second quarter, something in her body language changed. She stopped hesitating on drives. She started attacking closeouts instead of settling for the safer jumper. She began boxing out with an intensity that looked less like someone managing an injury and more like someone daring her body to give out on her, just to see if it would. It didn't. Broadcasters covering the game that night reportedly went back and rewatched the opening minutes afterward, trying to pinpoint the exact moment the shift happened, and there wasn't one single play that explained it. It was cumulative one contested finish, leading to more confidence leading to more aggression leading to results that made the hesitation from earlier in the game.
Clark with haste through the lane will lay it in.
And they talk about wanting to be more aggressively at the point of attack, and that's exactly what LA does.
Feel like it belonged to an entirely different player. The week unfolds. Here's the thing about proving people wrong. Once it's satisfying, but it's not the same as proving them wrong consistently. Anybody can catch fire for a single night. Adrenaline can carry a player through 40 minutes on a good day. What happened over the following 6 days is what turned this into a story worth telling. Game 2, she didn't ease off. If anything, she came out sharper, like the first night had answered the question of whether she could still play at this level. And now she was interested in a different question entirely. How much further could she push it? Another 25-plus point night. Another performance where the injury report from days earlier felt almost like a joke in hindsight. By Game 3, something had shifted in how opposing teams were approaching her. You could see it in the game film. Extra defenders sent her way. Coverages adjusted specifically to try to slow her down. And she still found a way. That's usually the real tell, with a player having a legitimate breakout stretch. Not that the shots are falling, but that the opposition is actively trying to stop it and still can't. Teammates started feeding off her energy. There's a phenomenon in team sports where one player's confidence becomes contagious. The whole roster starts playing a little looser, a little more aggressively, because they can feel that something bigger than a single performance is happening around them. Assists started flowing her way more naturally.
Clark led the league in assists a season ago. A little look, fake, and finish from Hall.
Her passing and the way that makes her a threat from so many different places on the floor.
Teammates began looking for her in crunch time, not out of obligation, but because at that point, why wouldn't you? Fans noticed too. Highlight clips from her games started circulating beyond the usual league coverage. Casual sports fans who might not have known her name a week earlier were suddenly asking who this was and how she'd gone from a question mark on an injury report to arguably the hottest storyline in the league. Commentators who had hedged their predictions about her just days earlier were now openly marveling at what they were watching, some even admitting on air that they hadn't seen this coming. By the fourth and fifth games of that stretch, the probable tag had become almost comedic in retrospect. A footnote nobody could quite believe, given what was unfolding on the court. She wasn't just meeting expectations anymore, she was resetting them, game by game, forcing analysts and opposing coaches alike to completely recalibrate what they thought she was capable of. And through it all, she stayed remarkably grounded about it. In post-game interviews, she deflected a lot of the individual praise, talking instead about her teammates, about trusting the training staff's plan, about taking it one game at a time. But every so often, a flicker of something else would show through a quiet, controlled satisfaction that suggested she knew exactly what this week meant, even if she wasn't going to say it out loud. By the time the week ended, the numbers spoke for themselves in a way that words couldn't top. A player who had walked into that stretch with real doubt hanging over her name had walked out of it as one of the most talked about performers in the league, not despite the uncertainty she'd been carrying, but in some strange way because of it. What made this stretch different from a typical hot streak is that it kept surviving contact with adjustment. In most sports, when a player starts putting up big numbers, the league corrects itself fast. Coaches watch film. Defenses adapt. The numbers usually come back down to earth within a game or two, because that's how competitive balance works at the highest level. This time, that correction never really landed. Every counter opposing coaches threw at her different matchups, different schemes. Physical defense designed to wear her down over 4 quarters got absorbed and answered. There's a particular kind of respect that gets earned in moments like that, one that goes beyond box scores. Opposing players started talking about her differently in post-game interviews. The guarded, professional kind of praise athletes reserved for someone they genuinely didn't see coming. One opposing coach asked directly about the defensive game plan against her, reportedly admitted there wasn't much more they could have done differently. Sometimes a player is just playing a level above what a scouting report can account for. Inside her own locker room, the mood shifted too. Early in the week, teammates were supportive in the way you'd expect, encouraging, careful not to put too much pressure on someone still managing a physical issue. By game 4 or 5, that tone had changed into something closer to expectation. They started looking for her without hesitation in the final minutes of close games, not out of blind faith, but because she had spent 5 straight nights earning exactly that kind of trust in real time. The real lesson. Here's what stays with me about this story. Long after the stat lines fade and the highlight clips stop trending, it's not really about basketball. Not entirely. It's about the gap between how the world labels you and what you actually know about yourself. Every one of us, at some point, gets tagged with our own version of probable. Maybe it's a boss who doubts whether you're ready for the promotion. Maybe it's people in your life who quietly assume you're going to fall short before you've even had the chance to try. Maybe it's the voice in your own head, whispering that you're not fully equipped for what's in front of you. The label doesn't ask permission. It just gets attached to your name, and the world adjusts its expectations accordingly. What made that week remarkable wasn't just the scoring average, it was the refusal to let a label dictate the outcome. She could have accepted probable as the ceiling. She could have played it safe, taken the modest role, protected the body, and nobody would have said a word. Instead, she treated that word as a challenge rather than a diagnosis. And what followed wasn't luck, it was the collision of preparation and opportunity. The kind of collision that only happens when someone refuses to let doubt make their decisions for them. That's the part of this story I think about the most. Not the 25 points a night.
Tonight for Caitlin Clark.
4 points in Indiana's 20-point win over Portland.
Caitlin Clark naturally changes the space on the floor, Pat. You have to come.
Not the highlight plays. The decision, made quietly, away from the cameras, to bet on herself when the paperwork said, maybe she shouldn't. Because in the end, probable was never a verdict on who she was. It was just a snapshot of one uncertain moment. And moments like that don't get to define a career or a person unless you let them. She didn't. That's the whole story, really. Not the points, the refusal. Think about how many decisions get made every day, in every field, based on labels like this one. A resume gets passed over because someone looks probable for the role instead of a guaranteed fit. A person doesn't get asked to lead the project because they're seen as probably not quite ready. Someone doesn't get the opportunity at all because on paper, in that specific moment, they looked like a risk instead of a sure thing. Most of the time, nobody ever finds out what would have happened if that person had been given the chance anyway. That's what makes stories like this one worth telling. Not because they're rare in sports moments like this happen more often than people realize, tucked into box scores that never get the spotlight this one did. They're worth telling because they're proof, concrete and undeniable, that the gap between probable and proven is smaller than most people assume. It's not always about talent nobody knew existed. Often, it's about talent that existed the whole time, just waiting for someone to stop hedging long enough to let it show up. There's also something worth saying about the role doubt itself plays in performances like this. It's tempting to frame doubt purely as an obstacle, something to overcome, something standing between an athlete and their potential. But stories like this one complicate that framing a little. For her, the doubt wasn't just an obstacle. It was, in some strange way, part of the fuel. Not because doubt feels good, it doesn't. And she's been honest about how uncomfortable that week felt before it turned into something historic. But because she used it instead of being used by it. She let it sharpen her focus instead of shrink her ambition. So here's a question worth sitting with. Where in your life has somebody labeled you probable? Where have you let a doubt someone else's or your own shrink what you were willing to attempt? The label was never the truth. It was just the starting point. What happens after is still up to you. Drop a comment and tell me about a time you were counted out and came back anyway. I read every one. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you're subscribed, because there's a lot more coming. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to someone is doubt them too openly. They tend to remember it, and they tend to make you regret it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.